All right. Well, first of all, thank you to everyone for joining. This is the third in our series of CTO webinars with Ben April. Really excited to reconnect here again today. I want to open the webinar today, first of all, by encouraging everyone to ask questions. This is being recorded. We want to make sure that this is available for folks after the webinar is over. But please share questions. Your feedback is really critical to one, ensuring that we're touching on topics that are relevant for our audience, for the market as a whole. And secondly, we want to make sure that you leave here with as much information as possible so that if you decide to engage with any resources here at Maltego, you have all the information you need in front of you. So with that being said, again, welcome to everyone. Thanks so much for joining. Ben, great to see you as always.
Good to see you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things that maybe I want to open the webinar with today. The first is that because this is an ongoing series, there is obviously there are a number of topics that we addressed in previous webinars where it'd be great to get a little bit of an update on kind of what the reception has been, where are we at relative to some of the timelines and expectations that we set from those previous webinars around our roadmap and the release of some of those capabilities. And then of course, we'd love to dive into the road ahead. But before we do that, Ben, maybe any feedback that you can share about, again, some of the announcements that we made over the first two webinars and perhaps how that has been rolled out over the last several months.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Justin. So yeah, let's start right at the beginning. We talked about version 3 of the transform protocol, and that is now available. There are a number of transform sets in the Maltego hub that implement those those capabilities. In addition to that, this week we're releasing in kind of a slow, controlled way what I'll call an early adopter arrangement around creating your own V3 transforms. So we're working with a couple of folks that reach out to us in early webinars and even before to start kind of that slow deployment. We're also working with some of our other data partners to get them engaged with the V3 transforms. The folks who wrote their own transforms, give them the opportunity to connect into that environment and start providing that amazing fun capability. So, in terms of how this stuff is resonating, I've heard lots of excitement. Folks, anyone I've talked to about V3 transforms, if they have ever written a transform in their life, they get it immediately. And it's an exciting moment of like, oh, I can do that now, and unlocks a whole bunch of things that I wish I could have done that in the past, but here it is right in front of you.
So to that point, Ben, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but for a refresher for anyone who maybe wasn't a part of that initial announcement, at high level, 2 or 3 bullets, what is the V3 transform? What does that mean for our customers?
Good call. So there are 3 big pieces. First one is graph in. So the prior version, the V2 version of the transform protocol, if you selected 20 entities and ran a transform, that transform would have been run once for each entity you selected. Now with V3, you're going to select 1 or more transforms. They're going to have relationships. All of that information is going to get passed to the transform, and it gets to decide whether it runs once for every item input, or maybe it uses, maybe you select a person and it's going to use the location and the phone number and the email address as additional filters to kind of limit your search results. You can also do things like analysis of a graph, looking at maybe what's the shortest path between 2 entities, for example, based on what you selected. So that's graph in. We also have graph out. So in the earlier version of the transform protocol, you'd run a transform, and the only output you get would be results connected to the subject transform. I'm sorry, excuse me, the subject entity. Now we can return entire subgraphs that get added to it. So now imagine enumerating an entire, say, blockchain segment with 1 click. Run out 10 or 15 transactions in a row just from starting from one address. Things like that are now possible, or connecting dots. The third piece is we call it long-running transforms. So it's the idea that some of the data sources we work with can be queried, can generate long-running queries. be that either a monitoring query. So you set up something, some of the Farsight tools can do this. You say, I want to watch for any domain name with bank in it, but that could run for a week. And in the case you've got a Maltego client running somewhere, running this transform, anytime a new domain name with the word bank appears, it would show up on your graph. But that also means if the query is going to take 5 minutes, that you can continue to do other things while you're waiting for results to come back. So those are the 3 big pieces there.
Is it safe to say, and this is something I hear quite a bit from our customers and from new prospects that I'm speaking to in the market, very, historically, I think Maltego has been used quite a bit for the one-off investigations as things get super complex. What I'm hearing in a little bit of the strategy, and we can touch on this in a moment, but it's really making Maltego and raising Maltego to the level of a true enterprise class tool that is being used for daily workflows and being able to really be integrated into some of the workflows that are higher utilization and, again, kind of a critical piece of day-to-day workflows versus just, again, the one-off. Is that a fair summary of some of the thinking behind this?
That's my plan is move up into that space where we have in our data hub lots of 100 plus data sources. We've got customers with 100 plus data sources of their own. Really trying to create a canvas where you can combine and mix and match and pivot between all the data sources you have available. And really to do that, it requires being able to really truly express the data in the way it's structured, not just mash it down to some least common denominator format. So that's really what we're looking for, is to build that structure all the way across all of the data sets.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. All right, so on the second webinar, we talked a little bit about maybe a new face, a new interface for Maltego users. Talk to us a little bit about that. What, kind of where are we at on that rollout, and how has that been received?
Yeah, so Maltego ID is cranking along. Primary release, as that we mentioned at the last webinar for the CE edition, should be coming out on the 6th of December. This is going to replace the existing username and login in Maltego CE. I want to say Windows CE. I don't know why I keep saying that. So it's going to replace that with a new updated login. It's going to have more capability in terms of things like two-factor, eventually having sign in with Google, sign in with Microsoft, things like that. But it's also going to be kind of a one unified profile for everything that happens within Maltego. That login will eventually link to your license key and any data entitlements you've got. So it's going to be one place. If you're in a corporate environment, you'll have the ability to manage configurations of various users, and it's going to simplify things. Nobody's going to have to maintain a spreadsheet listing all of the license keys for Maltego. It's just going to be built into the system.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
I should also mention that it's going to come out of the box with single sign-on capability. So in large enterprise environments where that really matters, we hear you. That's going to be an important piece.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And, I'm deep in conversations right now with a few folks who are really excited about some of these, kind of big rocks that we're moving here with some of these early announcements. But I don't want to delay too long here. The title of today's webinar is, I think, something that for anyone who has used Maltego and certainly dreamt of the art of the possible, like really wish these capabilities were here, time, space, and browser. 3 pillars, I think, of any enterprise class solution that is allowing users to engage with complex sets of data, tool sets, et cetera, the type of workflows, the type of use cases that we see for our customer base and certainly for the market as a whole. Time, space, and browser are 3, again, huge topics, and really excited to hear a little bit about it. Before we dive into that, though, these are, I think, tips of icebergs that are not ominous icebergs, but really, really exciting icebergs. But they are just the tip of the iceberg that we're talking about today. And the reason I mention that is we've talked about things that have a very concrete release date over the last couple of webinars, or at least, very much in the immediate horizon. This is a little bit more about the art of the possible work that's already being done. It's not to say that there's not a tremendous amount of effort that's already been put in, but these are ideas and concepts that have been in development for a long time, and now we're finally at a point where we can start to talk about it. Can you help me understand, or help the audience understand a little bit about the journey to get to this point, especially with these three core topics that have been near and dear to Maltego users' hearts for a long time?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I'll start by saying time and space was the first feature request I put in for Maltego back when I was an investigator. So,
Okay.
it's kind of tried and true. It's been on the roadmap for many years now. That being said, now that since I've been here at Maltego, and even before, I had a pretty good understanding of how important it is to get it right. There are many ways to refer to a timestamp. There are many ways to refer to location, and you'll find pretty much all of them assembled across the set of data sources, both that we have available and in the community at large. Those diverse forms of notation really drive the crux of the problem, right? I've got you've got Farsight data, which the data shows up here in Maltego in epoch timestamps, the number of seconds since 1970. Other places, other data sources, it shows up in local time zone of the user. Other data sources, it shows up in UTC time. Which is the right one? Which one do which one do we want to show you? So we've got to be able to abstract all of that in such a way that all of the data sources are speaking the same language and all of the data sources are conveying information in the same frame of reference. So that iceberg you're talking about, the Maltego entity model has evolved a lot over the years. And part of this process, getting to time and space, is it's going to have to evolve again. And that's a lot of what we've been working on behind the scenes. That's a lot of the heavy lifting. You said art of the possible. I think we're well beyond art of the possible in here, but I will mention that this is further in the future than we've talked about in the past webinars.
Sure.
Some of this stuff I've got kind of time frames. I don't have I don't have actual launch dates, but we can kind of spell out what we're looking for in terms of shape of the timeline. But yeah, so having that infrastructure to allow our data model in Maltego to easily intersect with ontologies in your tip, your seam, your SOAR. That's a really important growth step for us. We've got a lot of engineering work. Not to mention kind of a easy to overlook piece is the backwards compatibility. Yeah, we could easily go out and create a new model, but that's going to immediately invalidate all of the old graphs. Can't do that. So we've got to have a path to reach back in time and understand, extract the information we can out of the graphs that existed before and map them into the present model. So there's a lot of work under this. It's pretty exciting.
So that you actually touched on something that you've mentioned in the past, which is it's not releases just for the sake of releases, right? But it has to be done right. And it's very clear that in even how you're speaking about this, right, that there's a really big focus on ensuring that what we're doing now for the future doesn't break what customers have been doing up to this point, and that they're able to recognize new capabilities and not necessarily lose old capabilities, right? It's all about kind of taking everything forward. We've already got some questions in the chat, which is great, very much related to some of the stuff you're talking about. So I'll hold off a moment on asking them to you until you've gone through a little bit more of some of the high level of the roadmap. But suffice it to say, our audience is already thinking a little bit like probably you are and myself as far as kind of what does this mean for our existing customer base. So we'll get to those questions in a moment. But maybe if you can touch on what the again, these icebergs, the time, space, and browser really mean for our customers. If there's anything that you can show us, I mean, we'd love to to see kind of where the rubber meets the road with regard to some of these concepts.
Absolutely. So let me bring that up. In recent weeks, we have been working pretty hard to kind of establish this time frame, establish this plan and the timeline with these these big icebergs, these big pieces that are gonna develop this. First one out, the first one we'll talk about at least, time and space. We know the graph view is powerful. The graph view is incredibly useful, but it leaves out kind of all aspects around chronology and geolocation. So we are actively developing now both timeline view, map view, and the ability to combine the two and get that additional piece of information, that additional context that you may not otherwise be able to get just looking at the graph as it displays. This is going to be a long road. We'll have viewers and editors available, but mapping all of those data sources into a consistent framework of time and consistent framework of location is really going to be critical to making this super effective and as powerful as it can be. There are some other aspects to this that we'll eventually get to, including maybe you want to plot all of the entities on your graph along the x-axis based on number of users or number of hits or severity score, any of those things. Having that ability, that flexibility to change the layout based on what you need. These are all things we're thinking about down the road of how we're gonna increase the analytic capability without taking any specific capability or capacity away.
Can I ask, is a lot of the work that's being done now as part of this kind of future roadmap contingent on some of the development that you've already done for some of the new interfaces and things like that? Is it built on some of the same?
It's all stacked. So
yeah,
we'll talk about browser-based tools in a minute here. The collaboration tools we'll also mention, and even some of these map viewers and timeline viewers, when they're available via the web, that's all going to be tied through your Maltego ID connection, right? That's going to be kind of the binding force linking all these various tools and giving you access to your data across the entire suite.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so yeah, I won't derail any further. Anything else we can talk about here?
Okay, so let's move over to collaboration and browsers. It's all right, so Maltego for years, as we all know, Java-based client. We've heard loud and clear that maintaining a Java-based client in a browser-based world is hard. So we are actively in development on a suite of tools that will reduce the reliance on the Java application. That's not to say we're not gonna take the Java client out back and make it go away. We're gonna listen to the users as we go and adapt appropriately. We're gonna continue to apply new capabilities and features, but we may find there are some things that just aren't that don't scale well into the Java application. So this particular slide is really talking about two pieces. One of them is having Maltego in the browser. That is on our roadmap. That is part of our plan. The other one is collaboration, and that's also browser based. We are late stages of development and prototyping. Actually, I'd say even close to demo here of a collaboration tool that will allow you to upload graphs from either the Java client or a browser-based tool into a shared space. It imagines end-to-end encryption throughout the whole thing, so you get to decide who can see your data. Users will establish a key pair and encrypt that data in such a way that it's opaque to us. It's something you can publish and communicate to other people, or something you can keep to yourself. We're hoping the big advantage of this is the collaboration, allowing multiple people to work on the same graph, eventually multiple people working on the same graph at the same time, sharing, collaborating different data sources, and really blending that together, creating an environment where investigators from all over the world can work together and solve solve one problem at a time.
So actually, you're hitting on something I think also that is really particularly relevant right now. We continue to see a distributed workforce across, some of these
Mhm.
global customers that we have. The ability to collaborate across time zones and countries and everything else is really critical.
Yep.
One other thing that I think is, I didn't, we didn't talk about this prior to this webinar, but now I'm just kind of curious as I'm hearing you talking a little bit, and stop
Yep.
me if we can't speak to this. But as part of these new capabilities, I have to imagine that this introduces all new possibilities for our integration partners, as well as far as the kind of data that we're pulling in from these partners and how it's represented within Maltego. That has to be really exciting for our integration partners as well. They're going to be able to bring a lot more value to their Maltego customers, or customers who are leveraging them through Maltego, because of how we're going to be representing some of this data. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
That's my hope.
yeah,
Really accelerating the power of that data. The
yeah,
other angle of that you may not have seen is really leveraging data that the customers have and bringing that to the forefront and pivoting that with data from various data partners.
yeah,
So
yeah. It's phenomenal.
I think my favorite example is we've got a use case published where a game company does anti-fraud across their in-game economy, which is kind of it's a fun world to look at because unlike most of the world, they've got all the data, they see all the transactions, and they use Maltego to map and plot those things out. It's just kind of fascinating the crazy things you can do when you put all the data you have access to in one tool like this.
So on that topic, I'm wondering if you can share a little bit also. One of the things that I've been recognizing, especially recently, is that a lot of our conversations, especially with our larger enterprise customers, but really and any folks that we're speaking to, any of the practitioners, Maltego is not just, again, purpose built for one specific industry, one specific use case. It's intentionally agnostic, right, in terms of being able to allow anyone to visually represent their data, within Maltego. Are you finding that part of the driver behind some of the innovation and some of the roadmap that we're sharing now and will be, continuing to develop over time, is with that spirit in mind of continuing to be agnostic, or are there going to be much more purpose-built kind of features and capabilities that you're focusing on? How do you kind of view the market in that regard?
I think I'll try to have my cake and eat it too. I think
Yeah,
what you're going to see is a split right down the middle. As a tool, as an analytical platform, Maltego is going to get more capable and more diverse, and able to handle different types of data it's never been able to handle before. And just exponentially increase capability in that way. At the same time, Maltego as an organization, we're already working hard on, call it packaging or groupings
yeah,
of capabilities so that we're really enabling a specific use case. So we've got the data pass where person of interest investigators can have one SKU to get a high quality set of data sources
yeah,
that do everything that we need. Then we've got we'll talk about OSINT Profiler in a minute. That's another tool where it's a generic tool. It's capable of anything we want it to be able to do, but we've made a custom environment to just solve one type of problem, so that we recognize that sitting down at Maltego for the first time can be daunting. There's a lot of capability, there's a lot of optionality. If you've got a heavy transform load in there, you click on that first time, right click, I want to run a transform, and a big list comes up. And for a novice user, that's a big step. So in addition to kind of pre-packaging things, so if you're doing one kind of investigation, we've got all the data you need. We're also looking, this is not necessarily announced, so to speak, here today, but we've got work going on how do we help you figure out what the next transform you should run is.
yeah.
So we're looking at all kinds of stuff like that. So I'm going for both. I know I'm trying to have my cake and eat it too. But
No, that's wonderful though. And you had mentioned, I think, on the last webinar that there was, very much an effort to ensure that Maltego was much more approachable as far as, varying skill sets and levels of experience, and making it, as approachable as possible. So it sounds like we're doing a lot of that, prescribing some things, packaging some things for use cases that we know are very common with our customers, but also increasing capability so as new ideas and new work, use cases are being developed by our customer base, that we remain capable and able to support those. So that's great to hear. I'm sure you have a few more things to share here, Ben. So I'll let you get back to some of the roadmap discussion.
so I've got one more big one. This
Yep.
is technically not roadmap anymore. This is now in market product.
Yeah, this is an exciting one.
We've been kind of uncharacteristically quiet about it, but I think we're getting much more comfortable talking about it. Unfortunately, I'm not going to do a live demo, just because the data involved, the collateral damage of doing the wrong search, and I don't want to display anything unintentionally, so I'll bring this up. So Maltego ID, I keep saying that. OSINT Profiler is a new tool specifically designed to help people do person of interest investigations. It's tied into social media data. It's tied into stuff. This data is all available in the data hub as it stands, but OSINT Profiler is also available as an independent tool. Anything I'm going to show you here, you could do in Maltego if you were a seasoned investigator and knew what you were trying to accomplish. But at the same time, this is just a much more simple interface. You've got one form where you can, let me get me out of the way here. One form with one field to search. You can select the type of input you're looking for. You see my mouse there? Is that visible? No. Okay. So, in this case, I just searched for Maltego HQ, which is our, I was going to say Twitter handle. I guess it's not a Twitter handle anymore. So this is going against, like I said, our social media data sources. It's pulling up a bunch of things. It's also looking at compromised records, pulling out just various data here. So we've got our Twitter handle. I think that's probably Pull or Pivot. Our corporate website, things like that. So this takes sub 10 seconds to plug in like a social media alias or a name or a phone number, hit submit, get a search back very quickly. You can then pivot in and get specific details on any of these, where it came from, the provenance of the data, why the OSINT profiler thought it was relevant for this particular search. You can bookmark things. You can do subsequent searches down. So if you find a Twitter profile, you could drill into that. If you find a Facebook profile, you could drill into that. But then I think my favorite piece is the download button here. This is all Maltego in the back end. There's a graph that's constructed as you're running this web application, and you can download it into classic Maltego. So that's the result of the investigation, the super simple investigation I just did, as a Maltego graph with all the same information. So this is really intended to be a very quick start tool to go from, hey, I've got one indicator, I've got a name, I've got a phone number, I've got an email address, I've got a social media alias. What can I find out quickly? That may be enough. That may get you, the next step of your information, or you may find you've opened a case. And if you end up having to open a case and really go deep, you'll find yourself potentially handing this off to an analyst, and the ability to say, all right, capture what I've done so far and hand that off. It's trying to combine, like I said, trying to combine both worlds where, it's easy to use, it's quick to get started, it's powerful, but then you've got the capability to hand over and, potentially pivot with, other data sources that aren't included there.
That's phenomenal. I know we have to be very careful about mentioning any of the specific hub partners that we're using, but I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about the types of data sets that that are available, and maybe some of the potential use cases here outside of what you just mentioned from like a corporate kind of profiling perspective.
So I imagine from a use case perspective, like, the person manning the phone at a 911 center, and somebody calls up and said, hey, somebody's missing. Okay, give me your information, give me their information, plug in some things and start looking, see if there are Instagram posts, see if there are, Twitter or Facebook or whatever, depending on the age of the individual, I suppose. We've also got things like, breach data. So, in the event that, passwords have been breached and things like that, it's actually often super powerful for kind of pivoting between and confirming that maybe that's the same account because they're using similar passwords. Depending on the breach and the data source, you don't always get the actual password, but you can get additional information that way. So there's a lot in it. It's pretty exciting.
So what are some of the inputs that people can start with as far as the, when they're doing a search within OSINT Profiler? What are the different entity types that they can begin with? Obviously, name or company name.
Yeah, email, name, phone number, social media alias, I believe are the key ones.
Phenomenal. Okay.
And domain name is the last one.
Okay. And you mentioned that can then be downloaded and imported into a Maltego graph. Are there?
Well, actually, it's a Maltego graph on the server, right?
Fair enough. Okay. Yeah.
It's actually kind of, we're hiding Maltego from you.
But a potential maybe use case here is, you've got like a more entry level analyst doing that initial search, downloading that result, passing it over to an analyst who will then go within the Maltego interface itself and start doing the more in-depth, complex investigation from those pivot points that they've. Okay, yeah, phenomenal. What languages do we support right now for?
I believe this one's got English, German, and Spanish.
Great. Okay, phenomenal. Is there a plan to continue to evolve that or develop that over time as well?
That's gonna depend heavily on customer feedback. So
Sure.
Please reach out to your rep if you. First of all, this is available for demos and trial. So real time and live. Not I'm just not gonna work without a net on a webinar.
Yeah.
So do please reach out to your rep if you're interested in this. Reach out to your rep or support if you've got specific needs that aren't covered here. We'd love to make it work.
Yeah, phenomenal. Before I dive into any more of the questions that we've gotten a few from the audience here, which is wonderful. Anything else that you're planning to discuss or share today before we answer some questions?
I think that covers the list for today.
Okay, perfect. Then let me dive into a couple of questions here, and I'm going to take these in chronological order. So one of the early questions we got was regarding, with the announcement of the browser interface, is that going to do away entirely with the desktop client, or will that continue to be something that is part of our product suite?
I expect to continue to support the desktop client, as long as we have customers who need it. I'm not gonna take tools out from under people.
Phenomenal. Okay, so in terms of, again, like how that might affect existing on-prem deployments, we should see no disruption or interruption to that at all.
True, and I should mention that the intent, architecturally, the intent here is that all of this stuff will eventually be eligible for deployment on-prem.
Okay, phenomenal.
If that's a concern, that's a possibility as well.
Great, and piggybacking off the first one, will this become a SaaS offering?
The browser-based tools essentially are.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. All right. So there were some questions here about kind of struggling with extra large graphs and UI performance, even on high-end machines. Is there anything in the pipeline or as a part of these current, these announcements that we're making here that address some of that?
There's work ongoing in what we can do there. I'm not quite ready to talk about it here, but we are aware of that particular challenge, and we have some solutions in mind. These are, I'll call what we're doing here precursor steps to addressing that. Basically, the future roadmap is really built on what we've talked about today.
Phenomenal. Okay, so one of the other questions we got around the time and space is kind of curiosity around how that's going to be tracked from a queries consumed and things like that. Do we have a sense around what that modeling looks like today?
So the way I expect this to work is it's going to appear more like a new layout than it would a query structure. So it's not, you're already loading the data when
Yep.
you run the transforms, and we'll work with the data partners to make sure that, where relevant, geolocation comes along with that, time information comes along with that, all kind of consistently formatted. So
Okay.
you'll already have the data in the graph. In theory, if you built a graph 10 years ago and it has that data in it, you would be able to view it without running, view it in a timeline or view it in a map view without running any new transforms.
Okay, wonderful. I'm sure a question on everyone's mind, and I've seen this mentioned a couple times here in the questions, is, how does this impact? And again, I'm sure because this is a little bit more of a future discussion, some of these logistics are still being worked out, but will this be available to current users of Maltego Enterprise? Is there an additional fee or structure that we're going to have to get access to some of these new capabilities, or will it just be a part of what the next, version of Maltego Enterprise includes?
I don't know that I can specifically answer that today.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I,
Um,
I had to put it out there. I'm sure people are curious,
yeah,
but
yeah. I expect it's by and large going to be a continuation, an expansion of the product. But
yeah,
I expect the offering to evolve over time, so I can't necessarily speak to exactly what that's going to look like.
absolutely fair. I've seen the question about cloud storage come up a little bit here,
Yep.
and I don't know how much we can speak to that, but curious about what what the road ahead maybe looks like for folks who are interested in cloud storage.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the collaboration tool. Is end-to-end encrypted cloud storage. That'll be you'll have the ability in the client to say hey, save this to my cloud storage. You'll have the ability to open a graph from your cloud storage. What part of the web application there will be hey, I want to share this with somebody, some other Maltego ID. Share a graph, add notes. Case, starting with rudimentary case management, where you can say, hey, put these 4 graphs in this case file, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely fair. Okay, let me see. We got two additional questions here. So one is focused on um, any additional graph analytics capabilities that may be on the horizon. Is there anything kind of on our roadmap now that may help users who are looking for that additional kind of analytical capability or analytics capability on top of just the visualization itself, or is that, where does that fit in?
So to some degree, I think of timeline and the map view as an additional analytics capability. Where we get that question reasonably frequently. What I usually ask for is kind of more specifics on what kind of capability do you need. There are we're also looking at other graph representations. We're looking at other kind of analytical outputs, but really understanding what the use cases are and how we can help there would accelerate that.
Okay, perfectly fair. All right, so we've got a lot of folks who are volunteering for testing and beta testing, which is great. Well, absolutely. One of the comments I'll make at the end of this is kind of what resources are available to you to reach out to
Yeah.
post webinar to engage with us and become a part of the ongoing development here. I'm curious for, there's a couple of questions that I'm seeing here about specifically what additional sources of data might be included in OSINT Profiler over time. So we're seeing some questions around Cash App or other apps like that being eventually included. And then the other question was around like which social media platforms are included there. And that, of course, is a little bit dependent on the data partners that are included in OSINT Profiler, which, again, we won't share here on this webinar, but certainly you can reach out to us and we can talk anyone through specifics around the data sources that are available to you, which platforms are covered, things like that. Happy to go into more details on that.
I'll say just kind of generically, we are constantly looking to add, data partners and data types. So feedback, support, ping supports, ping your account rep. Let us know, what kind of data you think would be useful, and we'll probably want to talk about use cases so we make sure we understand, the boundaries of that. But absolutely.
Great. And you touched on this earlier, but in terms of how intuitive the next step, what's the next transform I should run? How intuitive that is right now within Maltego is very different than I'm sure what the road ahead looks like. Some people were asking questions around AI, whether or not there'd be AI kind of guided next steps, things like that. Is that part of the formula here?
It's something we're looking very closely at, and there's a lot of evolution going on in how we're thinking about that and how we're approaching that. We've got some tools that we're playing with at this point around kind of how to recommend what the next transform somebody should run is. So that work is ongoing. It's coming.
Awesome. And the last one I see here is around specific to OSINT Profiler. Curious if this is something that is available only to Maltego Enterprise users, or is it available in Pro and things like that as well?
I'm going to ask the sales guy. I don't know off the top of my head.
I will answer that question offline then once I get some more clarity on timing and things like that. But I'll make sure to get a response out to you, Charles, on that. Okay, so I guess the last thing is, when is OSINT Profiler available? I know that we had talked about people can reach out now and start getting access to demos and to POCs. Is this this is available for purchase now for anyone?
That's my understanding.
Love it, love it. Ben, as always, this is kind of exciting just to hear some feedback from our customers and from folks who are attending the webinar, but to understand more clearly and more acutely kind of how you're thinking about the road ahead as someone who is on the front lines and talking to our customers every day. It's great to be able to talk about not just capabilities and how they align to your current workflows or use cases, but also how Maltego is thinking about the future and how that aligns to how our customers are thinking about the future as needs and requirements are changing, as digital footprint continues to expand and teams and functions become a little bit more blurred because of their dependence on great data. I think Maltego is obviously a phenomenal tool for that, and great to see the work that's being done from your team to help align us to the future of our customers' needs. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, my friend.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank our audience as well. I think this feedback is always super valuable. Looking forward to the next one.
Perfect. So for anyone who's interested in testing or getting any more information, if you're an existing customer, you have an account management team. This includes your customer success manager. We have subject matter experts, and you have account executives. We are all here to be a resource for you. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. If you don't know who your account rep is, that is something that you can reach out to us at sales or support at maltego.com. We're happy to connect you with the appropriate point of contact to get more information. And please don't hesitate to reach out to us with feedback as well. That's critical to informing how Ben and his team continue to operate and prioritize new releases. So it's encouraged and really welcomed. And thank you again, everyone, for attending. And Ben, thanks so much for sharing. We'll look forward to the next webinar.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for the time.
Thanks, everyone.